Naya's Wednesday Part 2. Naya. Walking to Andros' laboratory, there was a sense of nervousness that filled me as I neared the miniature kingdom of the Keep's head authority on magic. Typically, Andros' job was one of two main tasks that he had been brought here to perform. His first task was to aid in dispelling any of the numerous curses or magically given injuries that our soldiers could get from fighting some of the more magically inclined demi-humans. Andros' secondary task was to ensure that the Keep's magical defenses were intact and enhanced if need be. But there was also a few of the minor tasks that the wizard oversaw. One of which being the study of magical items brought in from the field. I wouldn't consider Hugin to be a magical item, but he was probably close enough for the mage to not be bothered by it. After all, for all that everyone here knew, Hugin was just a regular raven that could conjure lightning if need be. And for the foreseeable future, that was all that anyone here needed to know. Yet, Hugin being examined wasn't what made me nervous about our trip to the laboratory. What made me nervous was the title that Andros had gained from the soldiers of the Keep, Andros the Addled. And it wasn't an undeserved title. The man had an odd personality that was rumored to have come from him messing with too many magical items over his career. As such, it made him a bit lacking in normal social decorum. I just hoped that it wouldn't cause too much trouble for Hugin and I. Attempting to take my mind off the upcoming meeting with the addled mage, I thought about the events that had just occurred at the infirmary. Healing those 5 soldiers of the squad hadn't ended just after I had saved the last person I could. Karen had ended up pulling me aside to ask me a few questions. All of which pertaining to a religious nature. That had been a bit of an interesting conversation to say the least. Miss Baraha, these miracles that you performed, when did you first know that you could do them? Karen had asked. I'm not exactly certain. I lied, I just had this odd feeling that I could do something to help Ulrich when I saw him. After that, the knowledge to do so again just stuck with me in my mind. Karen looked at me with curiosity as I said this, very interesting. I cannot say for certain what thoughts the 4 had when giving this miracle to you, but I can easily guess that it is because they have a plan for you. They may reveal that plan to you in time, or they wish for you to discover it for yourself. Oh, believe me, Karen, Odin has already told me more than enough about the plan he had with me in mind. Your guess is as good as mine. But until that day, I'll be satisfied with helping others with this blessing of mine. A bright smile grew upon Karen's face at my words. That is wonderful to hear. If you're willing, might you come by the infirmary every once in a while to give us some assistance if needed? I'll make certain to inform your commanding officer to permit you the time if you were to agree. I nodded in answer. Already, Odin had been receiving some prayers from the people I had helped heal. I just needed to continue these healing sessions to build up more of a following, and eventually, the following would start growing without my direct actions. I'll come back tomorrow. I promised, but for now, I have to go meet up with Andros. That earned a sympathetic nod from the priest. Good luck with Andros and his eccentricities. He can be a handful for anyone that is unprepared. Karen remarked with a wry smile. Try to avoid doing anything too extreme, Hugin. We're trying to get Andros to like you enough so that you're allowed to stay, I whispered to the raven. Hugin's head cocked to the side in a twitchy manner. Then, he gave me a dry look, followed by a warbled hum. Hugin's response managed to also get a slight chuckle from Odin. Guess Hugin wasn't enthusiastic about the request. That, or he felt slightly miffed that I doubted that he could control himself. But that would soon be put to the test as I arrived at the Addled's laboratory. With a small inhale, I reached the door handle, turned it, then pushed it open to step inside. The first thing I noticed upon entering was the smell of something having been burnt. Perhaps similar enough to burnt bread. Inside, the laboratory was a chaotic mess. The tables were littered with arcane objects, books, and papers covered in notes or images of spell circles. It was at one of these tables that I finally found the addled himself. His back was to me as he hunched over a staff that he was casting spells over. Even from here, I could hear Andros talking to himself at the speed of a whirlwind. He held out his left hand and a spell circle appeared in it before a book flew from another table and into his waiting hand. It was here that I noticed he was missing both his middle and ring fingers, instead replaced by a pair of wooden prosthetics held to his hand by a webbing of leather straps. Wonder why he hasn't had those fingers healed back by one of the priests. As I got closer to him, I could hear the mutterings of his more clearly, raise the necessary stabilization matrix to prevent complete mana overload. Possibly will require the excess mana to be channeled out as a precautionary measure. None of what he just said made any sense to me. But looking over to Odin, he appeared heavily invested in whatever Andros was saying. Still, I was here for a reason, and I'd like to leave as soon as I could. It felt creepy in here. Excuse me, Andros. Leave me be, assistant. I'm extremely busy and require focus. He then waved his hand over to a less cluttered table. Just put whatever research notes you have for me on the table and I'll critique them later. And almost as if he had forgotten I was here, he went back to his work. Genius and madness are always well entwined. Makes me quite curious as to what ideas of genius might be lurking within the seas of madness that is this mortal's mind. My eye just stared at the back of the adult. He wore a large robe that was a dark grey. It was hard to distinguish if it had always been that color or had once been lighter before years of the mage's work and lack of cleaning had turned it dark. Andros' brown hair was down to his shoulders and unkempt from lack of care. Andros, girl, I already told you once before to leave your research notes on the table. Now, leave. I found myself glaring daggers with my eye at being rudely interrupted once again. Yet, this time, Hugin got involved as he began loudly cawing. Who the hell brought an animal into my Andros blinked in surprise as he looked at Hugin and I with his green eyes. Who are you? I had to hold back the heavy urge to groan in frustration. Accomplishing that, I answered, my name is Naya Baraha, sir. Commander Darian wanted me to meet you so that my friend could be inspected. The adult gave me an incredulous look as he glanced between Hugin and I. Girl, I'm a mage specializing in the study of magic. I have no inkling on animal husbandry or biology. If you want your pet inspected, bring it to a farmer. Hugin and I looked at each other. Go ahead and show him. We looked back to Andros and Hugin extended his wing and an arcing ball of lightning appeared before us, releasing some winds that caused the loose papers on nearby tables to fly up and scatter. When Hugin finally ended the display, Andros' eyes were almost bug-eyed. And, much to my surprise, Andros moved faster than I could ever believe a mage should be able to as he rushed out of his chair and stood before us examining Hugin with intense fascination. A raven capable of casting magic. Is it a normal member of its species or has it been altered in some manner? Perhaps it's a member of a new species that has evolved from close proximity to large concentrations of mana. The spell felt like it was second tier at the very least. Could it cast even higher tiers? On and on, the adult's questions went, none of them actually directed towards us and instead just the highly verbal thought processes of the man. Midway through his rambling, he cast a spell over Hugin that finally got him to shut up. At least for a moment. Where did you get this bird? Andros almost demanded as he looked at me. I didn't get him. I quickly corrected, we met a few days ago, in the Abelian Hills, when he saved my life. Since then, we've been together. Other than that, I don't know where he came from. Andros seemed to grumble at the answer, right. How much coin would it take to buy the creature off of you? My eye widened at the, frankly insulting, offer. Hugin gave an indignant caw of anger as I felt a buzzing in my mouth from the build-up of more lightning from the raven. Hugin is not for sale. And he never will be. I answered. I'll throw in 100 gold. Andros countered, as if expecting that it was simply a matter of cost. The further build-up of a static feeling across my body told me that this was getting extremely dangerous, for Andros. Andros, you need to understand that there is no price for Hugin as he is not for sale. Trust me, this is starting to get dangerous. I replied, earning a confused look from the mage. Dangerous? What about 200 go? He continued on. And, as if in reply, lightning began to crackle off of Hugin in random intervals. One bolt, of which, got exceedingly close to the adult until he backed away with a yelp. Seemingly satisfied with the reaction, lightning stopped sparking from Hugin. I heard laughing from Odin at the entire spectacle. I get your point, Andros admitted as he kept a safe distance away from the angered raven. We just came here to have Hugin inspected so that he could stay here. Why is it that you were so interested in buying him? I questioned. Andros wearily glanced at Hugin, as if looking for permission to speak. Then, he answered, I used an invented spell of mine to inspect the Kriya. A warning call from Hugin got Andros to correct himself. Hugin, to inspect Hugin for information alongside the mana within him. Taking a moment to calm down, Andros soon continued, my spell told me nothing about what Hugin is, something that is extremely unusual since my spell has never been obscured before. The one thing the spell did tell me was the amount of mana within him. The only thing I've ever inspected that's come close to what I just saw were from the ancient relics back in the capital. I gave a side-eyed glance to Hugin. I'm not exactly surprised to hear this since he's basically a god, and things that are powerful typically have a lot of mana. But this also got me to ponder something else. If Hugin, and I'd also assume his sibling Munin as well, had that much mana while created from just Odin's eye, then how much mana was flowing within Odin's entire body right now? It was a little humbling to think about. I wanted to study him to see if there was a reason for this. Possibly even a method to replicate whatever is making Hugin so laden with mana. Andros finished before adding, perhaps I may have been too enthusiastic about my approach. Pursing my lips, and slowly nodded, I understand. But where does that leave us with Hugin being allowed to stay here? Andros gave me an expressionless look as he answered, technically, with the amount of mana in him, along with how much of his nature is just unknown to me, the safest thing to do is keep Hugin out of the keep as he could present a grave danger to everyone here. But I consider the safest option to be the most boring and unenlightening. I'm of the opinion that if we have something dangerous and unknown, one should try to learn more about it instead of shunning it away in fear and ignorance. Everything that Andros was saying made me feel hopeful. So, you're telling me that Hugin can stay? A smile perked up on the adult's face. Yes, but there would be a few conditions. His smile then became a grin as his eyes turned manic. I'd like him brought to my lab to be examined once a week. Additionally, I would want a sample from Hugin that I could study in the meantime. It could be a feather, blood, or something else. Up to you. I looked to Hugin, who began to make a rumbling noise in his throat. What do you think, Hugin? The raven made a humming noise that seemed more like a grumble, then he ruffled his feathers and flew over to a less cluttered table. I expected for Hugin to pull a feather out and set it down. What I didn't expect was for Hugin to defecate on the table and then fly back to my shoulder. A warbled rumble let me know that Hugin was laughing, something that Odin followed suit with more laughter of his own. Andros didn't appear as enthusiastic about the sample that Hugin left him. I think that's all that Hugin plans to give you, Andros. I commented, earning a quick snort from the mage. No, Andros said while holding his hand up, that was on me. I did say the choice of sample was left up to you. Then, Andros waved us away. I've received my sample, so the pair of you are free to go. I'll expect to see you back here next week. With the unsubtle request for us to leave, Hugin and I exited the lab and started to walk the halls of the keep. Around this time, Odin spoke up once more. This is another case where one should be careful for what they wish for. Though, I will have to admit that the mage does both amuse and intrigue me. And why is that? I'd believe that a god would be upset if someone tried to buy their child from them. Why aren't you? I questioned. There was no chance of that occurring in the first place. Aside from that, the mortal was simply under the assumption that Hugin is just a magical bird. No thoughts of divinity ever crossed his mind. It makes for good entertainment when living in eternity. As for my intrigue, I enjoy when others choose a pursuit of knowledge to chase after. Actually, It likely explains why my counterpart decided to go easy on the girl and help tutor her. After all, few have the stones to ever challenge us on their lonesome. I found myself looking at Odin oddly when he said that. "What are you talking about, Lord Odin?" said elderly god, just smiled in amusement. "Nothing much, Naya. Just an old man's pondering on events through a multiversal viewpoint. Ignore my ramblings." Giving a shrug to the answer, I continued my way through the halls. Commander Darian. Day 34. Receiving the message yesterday confirmed my fears and Private Naya's report on the enemy we had almost upon our doorstep. Last night prior, I had the troops assembling a large score of pots laden with oil alongside traveling provisions in preparation for today. In addition, all of the soldiers versed in ranged combat spells were being assembled if they could be spared from their current posting. This keep has 4,562 soldiers of the kingdom assigned to it as a permanent garrison. Of them, 753 are mages of varying ability. We also once had 105 paladins assigned to the fort, myself included, until Captain Francus was taken by the Crimson Tree. Of these paladins, I, and 49 of the others, were capable of ranged spells. I am only willing to bring 300 of the mages with me, leaving the rest at the keep alongside the paladins incapable of ranged combat spells. To bolster our ranks so that the mages wouldn't be at risk from any form of close-ranged combat that could potentially occur, I was going to bring 200 of the regular soldiers as the front guard for the combat mages. Pulling almost 1,000 troops from the keep was a risky maneuver as it took a great deal of strength from the keep's defenses. I planned for this assault to take less than 4 days before we returned. But I would never fully put faith in such a plan working out exactly as expected. I've been a soldier for this kingdom long enough to know that plans are almost always the first casualty in conflict. As for today, my soldiers had been geared up and on the march by the time the sun had only begun to crest the horizon. We did not have time to waste. The people of Robley could not afford it. While marching, I thought back on my decision to leave Private Naya behind instead of bringing her along as a guide. My reasoning was twofold on this. The first reason is that she has only recently been crippled with the loss of one eye, from which Karen informed me he had been unable to heal back. This left the girl as more of a liability in potential combat situations as she would need to adjust to the lost vision, an adjustment which would take more than a few days to accomplish as I already knew of the girl's record from looking at it after she had given her report. Private Naya was a loyal soldier who followed orders, but she was astoundingly average as far as any form of combat ability went. Too average to adjust her body to the new way she'd have to fight for the foreseeable future. As for my second reason, leading to a similar conclusion as the first, the girl had managed to make a distance of over 20 miles in the span of a day after being heavily injured. Healing magic or not, an exhausted soldier was more harm than help on the battlefield. Then again, perhaps it could potentially be due to me being soft. The girl is relatively new for a soldier. I could tell in her eye as she gave that report that she had the long gaze of a soldier who saw horror and can't let go. I've seen that look far too often in enough soldiers over the years. It could lead to her panicking or hesitating when confronted with the Crimson Tree and its abominations. We couldn't afford that kind of problem as things like panic could spread like a pestilence amongst soldiers in stressful events like combat. Hearing the crunch of boots approaching me instead of maintaining a normal march, I looked over to see the plated form of Lieutenant Sorin. "How goes the troops?" I asked. "Prepared and in good spirits, Commander. There's been scant grumblings about the march, other than the normal complaints that any soldier would make during a march." Lieutenant Sorin replied, to my satisfaction. "I'm pleased to hear that." I commented and added, "We'll reach the monster in good time at this pace. I doubt that we can arrive to the hill by tonight without the men being exhausted from the journey. We'll need to set camp beforehand a few miles away from the hill as we can't afford any mistakes because of the troops being tired." "I understand, Commander. I'll move off to inform Lieutenant Edgar of the decision," Lieutenant Sorin stated before giving me a final salute and moving back to the troops behind us. It was a scant few minutes after this that my mind was filled with that of a message, spells effects. Commander, no further activity has occurred near the tree. It appears that it has slowed down on attempting to convert anyone further. The strike force will be all clear to attack. The voiceless words of the message filled my head. This was thankful news to be given. We needed all the good fortune that we could receive, as I shuddered to think of what may occur were we to fail this attack. Above me, I heard the loud cawing of a raven or crow. Looking up, my eyes focused on the bird that had been following my army for a few hours now. It likely was expecting some kind of feast of corpses from the upcoming battle. Even if I would love to tell this bird that it would only starve if it expected to be feasting on my men, that was only a naive optimism that I had long since lost from my many years as a soldier. There were always casualties in battles. What counted is how many of my soldiers I could get back home alive. Yet, despite it being childish, I mentally found myself telling the bird to piss off. If it wanted to feast upon the corpses of those under my command, then I was going to make damn sure that it would have a difficult time getting to any of them. Day 35. At the approach of the Crimson Hill, I looked over to my 2 lieutenants Edgar and Sorin. We had taken great care to prepare for this plan beforehand. Now, it was time to enact what was readied. Lieutenant Edgar, take your men and begin spreading oil around the left. Lieutenant Sorin, you take yours on the right. Once completed, hold back from igniting the oil until the first barrage of magic attacks. Of course, Commander. Edgar and Sorin replied with nods as they quickly moved off to lead their troops. A few minutes later, and I saw the army splitting up into 3, with my lieutenants' armies moving off to their assigned positions as a few soldiers poured out oil around behind the paths they took. This left me with the troops under my direct command. Turning behind, I looked at my soldiers, all standing at attention in preparation of the moment. They no doubt felt that same tension of battle as I did. Soldiers, march forwards 100 paces, I commanded to all of them so that we could get in close enough range for our mage's attacks. Following after me, the soldiers marched until we had reached the necessary distance. Halt! I called out, stopping the march. Mages and paladins, take position and prepare your spells. Frontline, take a knee for first barrage. The cawing of the bird filled my ears, as if announcing the commencement of the assault. The regular soldiers knelt down as, behind them, numerous blue arrays of magic lit up at their hands. Unholstering Dawnfall, I pointed it forwards. Fire! My ears were filled with the noise of fire roaring as multiple blasts of flames flew over my head, and at the hill with the crimson tree. I expected that the tree would be washed in flames and burn. Color me both surprised and immensely concerned when a multitude of crimson roots burst out from the nearby corrupted hills and blocked the hundreds of bolts of fire like a living shield. My eyes narrowed as I saw the crimson roots begin to burn. This told me 2 things. This monster was fast enough to react to, and block, hundreds of attacks at once. And that the monster was weak to fire, considering how much the roots we could see were burning. Second barrage, I ordered immediately. After a few moments, I called out again, fire. This time, the creature acted before we could as crimson spears shot out from the hills and rained upon us. Reacting immediately, I raised my mithril shield up before myself and felt the heavy impact of one of the spears hitting my shield. My arm rattled under the weight of the blow and I looked past my shield to see a crimson spear of wood and roots slowly twist and squirm, which was 6 feet in length. The cries of pain in my ears made me turn back to my men to see spears jutting through many who had been unable to raise their shields in time. I heard the gurgling cries of my men who had been unlucky enough to have been struck in a vital organ. What I didn't expect, nor did any of the other soldiers, mages, or paladins who stood near their injured comrades, was for roots to then burst out of any who'd been impaled, stabbing into others near them, before rapidly pulling the impaled together. It was an absolutely horrific type of inhuman brutality that I've never seen before, especially because all of those affected were still alive, screaming in agony. And as I continued watching, these roots that impaled my soldiers began to slowly grow around them into new cocoons. Around this point, trails of fire burst to life from where I had our soldiers pouring out oil earlier. The scene became one more akin to an infernal hell. My soldiers were in disarray or horrifically wounded by the spears of the monstrous tree. And the world around me was filled with screams of pain, shouting, and that of a raging inferno. "Keep your shields up and ready a retreat," I roared over the noise. I looked back to the tree and saw another volley of spears raining upon us once again. Raising my shield up, I took another hit and saw a dent get put into my shield this time. This thing was increasing the power of its attacks. "Commander." A voice spoke before me over all the chaos. Lowering my shield, I found myself staring at the form of Captain Francus. Except, his body was covered in writhing roots that acted like exposed veins. His eyes had also changed, now red with slitted pupils that continually shifted as they gazed upon me with a fondness that seemed unnatural in them. "Captain Francus?" I asked with suspicion while readying Dawnfall. "Yes, Commander," he answered before an expression of regret crossed his face. "I'm sorry for this hostility against comrades. It's just that my lord did not expect such actions from you or your men and reacted to protect himself." "Your lord?" Captain Francus gave me a smile and nodded. "Yes, my lord. He showed me the truth of things. Revealed to me and others that the four great gods were always one. He told me so much that I'm forever grateful for." My brow rose at the ridiculous statement that my former subordinate was telling me. "Are you insane, Francus? Or are those roots writhing upon your body corrupting your mind and filling it with heretical blasphemy?" I readied my mace in preparation for any hostile move my former subordinate might make. "No, Commander. I've just been enlightened. It may seem frightening, but these roots are just the one great God's blessing." Francus tried to explain. "A blessing that involves impaling others before cocooning them against their will. And following this, being torn apart if the final creation is flawed." A scowl filled my face, such a farce to call this anything more than monstrous and demonic. Francus gave me a weary sigh as he shook his head in disappointment. "I had wished that you might see reason, Commander. The failures were only because the one great God's blessing was something that the demi-human orcs couldn't handle as it was too much power at the time for them." I glared at Francus as he said this. I never knew Francus as a man to treat life so callously, even if said life was that of an enemy. I can't help but wonder if this is what you are actually saying or if it's the roots that are just using your voice. "Please, Commander. It is me. These are my thoughts and feeling, not another's." I wouldn't hear anything further from my former subordinate as I quickly charged him. Francus readied himself as a crimson mace of roots grew in his right hand. Heavy blow. I activated the martial art and slammed Dawnfall at his head, attempting to end this fight quickly. Francus put his created mace in front of Dawnfall and blocked the attack, though not without any damage as the roots forming his mace cracked under the blow. A new mace grew in his left hand and he quickly swung it at me, ability boost. Holy strike. My shield quickly met the attack and I felt my arm rattle as a few spikes of the mace managed to poke through my shield. Alongside this was the explosive force of his skill which made my shield ram into my side. That surprised me for a pair of reasons. I've sparred with Francus before, and he's never had this amount of power in his blows. Even observing him in the field, there had been no sign of him being strong enough to pierce through mithril. He's been augmented in some way. Before he could react, I kicked him in the chest, launching him back. "Flame touch," I said, igniting Dawnfall in flames for a few moments as I capitalized on Francus' momentary open guard and slammed my mace upon him once again. A few roots at his chestplate formed into another layer of armor in response. Holy strike. I activated the skill, Heavy Blow. I reinforced the strike and watched as my mace burned through the root armor, cracked apart the chestplate, and heavily injured his body as he was launched back once again while the fire-lighting Dawnfall finally extinguished itself. Most fights aren't like the ballads that bards would sing about. They didn't go on for hours on end. Both opponents weren't always able to reveal their spells and skills. When it came down to it, they would end in seconds after a decisive blow. Frankus was a noble and skilled warrior. But he was too young, too slow and weak, and lacked the experience necessary to keep up with me at my best. But I had so many hopes that he would have surpassed me one day. Heal. Frankus quickly fixed the damage I had done, but I didn't plan to give him a moment's reprieve as I rushed at him. Piercing strike, waving his hand, spikes of roots fired at me from those writhing on his hand. Putting my shield before me, those root spikes punched through the mithril of my shield, yet it didn't slow my charge as got closer. A new mace formed in Frankus' left hand that he began swinging at me, piercing strike. Heavy blow. With the results of his previous attack, this could possibly break my shield. But this would come at the cost of exhausting my former subordinate. All of these martial arts he had been using would burn out his stamina. With the expectation that I was going to lose my shield, I may as well make use of it. Flame touch. I ignited my shield and punched out with the edge of it aimed at the shaft of Frankus' mace, both riposting the attack and cracking the shaft of his mace in turn. Yet, this came at the cost of my shield being split down the middle. With my foe open, I slammed Dawnfall at his head once more, though Frankus managed to throw his arm in front of the attack, reinforcing it with more roots. Dawnfall came down hard, creating a loud snapping noise as Frankus' right arm broke in the center of his forearm. The paladin screamed in pain as Dawnfall went for the finishing strike. As I went to smash Dawnfall upon Frankus' head, putting him out of his misery, I felt a sharp pain from my back that went through me and out my chest. Looking down, I spotted a sharp tip of red poking out from my chest plate. What? I found myself asking hoarsely. I'm sorry, Commander. But this is for the best. You'll understand soon. A familiar voice said from behind me. Looking over, my eyes widened at the sight of Sergeant Kellen staring at me with a pair of somber red eyes. His hand covered in a shaft of crimson roots that impaled me. Then, he broke it off his hand and slowly stepped around me to stand with Frankus. But your message, I said, already feeling roots attempting to wriggle and grow within my body. A fake, Commander. We had to ensure that you suspected nothing when you went to attack. Kellen explained, causing me to grit my teeth. A trap. We had all walked into a trap on my orders. Smite. I cast the spell and watched my former subordinates jump away from me as the attack burst the ground where they once stood. With a moment of breathing room, my free hand gripped the base of where the root had stabbed me before I cast Flame Touch. I felt horrific pain as I lit the roots on fire that were growing within my body, additionally burning me from within as well. Commander, Frankus shouted in shock and concern that was shared by Kellen. I was on the verge of passing out and succumbing to my self-inflicted injuries until I cast another spell, Heal, repairing much of the damage. Unfortunately, it couldn't remove the dead roots that still remained impaled within my body. This would leave me at a handicap in a fight against these two. Why would you do that, Commander? Frankus asked. I found a grim smile growing on my face. Going through that agony was better than enduring life as a puppet to a demonic tree. If today is to be my last, then I will do so while steering my own destiny. I answered as the roar of the inferno behind me grew louder while the heat became sweltering. In a way, it was fitting that my last trial by fire to the fore would be while surrounded by literal flame. Commander, enough, I roared over whatever attempt that Frankus was trying to convince me with. Before this day is done, I'll ensure that at least one of you is released from this puppeteering torment. Looking down at my shieldless left arm, I took a breath and ripped off some of the cloth of my tabard before wrapping my fist in it. Flame touch, I said, igniting the cloth and covering my armored fist in flame. Even now, I could feel the bite of the flames through my gauntlets, but it was minor to what I endured earlier. You leave us no choice, Commander, Kellen stated. There's always a choice. You've chosen pain. Flow acceleration. Activating the martial art, my perception of the world began to slow down. Then, I took off charging at the pair. Frankus was still tired and injured from our last fight. His right arm was still broken, even if the roots covering it had now snapped it back into place. He didn't have enough time to cast another heal spell upon himself, and he had to be running low on mana at this point. Body strengthening, Frankus said in activation of his martial art. The sweat on his brow, combined with his heavy breathing, told me how much strain was being put on his body. While the roots covering him gave a boost to his strength and combat ability, they did little to aid in endurance, evasion. Kellen activated his skill, his sword drawn and at the ready. Kellen would be harder to deal with if he was able to dodge all of my attacks. Both men likely suspected that I would go for Frankus then, due to his obvious weakness. That is what they expected this injured soldier to do. They expected wrong. Gale acceleration. I activated the skill, putting even more strain on my body that I likely wouldn't be able to move from by the time this battle ended, but throwing off any type of mental preparation those two had for my charge as my speed increased beyond compare. I was already upon the pair before they could blink. Dawnfall swinging for Kellen's midriff. With his ability to dodge increased, I needed to aim for an area of his body instead of a specific point. At the same time, my fist was aimed for Frankus' head. I couldn't punch him because my body was already swinging Dawnfall, but my current momentum would more than compensate for it and act as a punch on its own. I didn't expect it to land, but I did expect that it would make Frankus back away for a few vital seconds needed to take down Kellen. Kellen tried to dodge away while attempting to block my Morningstar with his sword. At the same time, Frankus pulled his upper body away from my flaming fist, making him go off balance in the attempt to do so. But unknown to both of the infested men, Frankus' face wasn't my true goal. As soon as Dawnfall made contact with Kellen's blade, and acting as a contact point, I pivoted on my right foot and transferred all my momentum to my fist. I felt my muscles start tearing at the strain of what I did, but I ignored it and put my strength into slamming my fist into Kellen's head. "Sorry, Sergeant." I apologized as the attack made contact, eliciting a choked scream as my former officer's neck snapped from the weight of the hit. Memorizing exactly where Frankus was falling, I did one final pivot and raised my right foot while twisting on my left. I heard my ankle snap at the force as I transferred my remaining momentum and strength into my right arm and swung Dawnfall one last time. I was abruptly stopped as a crimson spear impaled me diagonally downwards from my chest and into the ground. The sudden break from this attack caused me to crack my ribcage as my body attempted to still spin. The pain was excruciating, but I didn't cry out. It felt like the world was just becoming numb at that point. My eyes gazed ahead to see what remaining troops that had survived were running away, the fire cutting off any other infested being that might chase after them. Good. Some got away. They'll inform those at the keep. Robley won't be caught unaware. I could feel roots starting to grow into me, one managing to puncture my lung, making me cough blood. Even now, with my broken body, this monster was still trying to grow into me. I wouldn't give it the satisfaction of doing so. Flame 2, my right arm was grabbed by Frankus, preventing me from touching the root that was impaling me. I did the same with my left, and found myself horrified to see Kellen holding my arm back. His head was twisted in an impossible angle that was slowly fixed as the roots around his neck twisted it back into place with multiple cracks. How? I found myself asking. The one great God blessed us so that his followers can survive greater injuries that might kill another. You'll understand soon enough, Commander. Kellen answered as his neck made one final crack which signified his neck being repaired. Looking at the approaching inferno, I smirked. I doubt it. Even if you two don't burn, I will, I spat back to the pair as my eyelids grew heavier. Suddenly, I saw spears of roots impacting the edges of the flames, launching up dirt in large waves which helped to extinguish any of the approaching flames. This also acted as a barrier to prevent further fires from spreading any closer. No. I weakly shouted as I felt the roots growing outside my body as well as inside. Worry not, Commander. You'll understand everything soon enough. That was the last I heard from Francus as roots grew up my face and deafened me. I had one last look to the inferno that I desperately wished to come closer and free me from this moment, then the roots closed in and left me in darkness. Naya. Day 38. It had been 2 days, going on 3, since all of us at the keep had seen the massive black clouds begin billowing from the southeast. A massive fire could be seen on the horizon growing closer. Each night, we saw the ominous light of the fires in the east as they continued spreading. I had no idea how much longer or farther this blaze would go on. What was more worrying is that the assault force hadn't returned yet. The longer they were out there, the greater the chance that they had failed to fight the tree or they had been caught in the fire before they could escape. The only ways I found to take my mind off of these uncertainties were from the new duties I had been given by Karen to heal those on the brink of death that neither he nor his fellows priest could save. Well, that and all the extra combat training I've been forced to undergo by Lieutenant Johann. Since my eye wasn't coming back anytime soon, at least that's what they believed as I knew it to be permanent, Lieutenant Johann wanted me in fighting shape as soon as possible. This meant more time practicing swordplay so that I could learn to cover my blind spot and extended archery session to relearn how to aim. On top of all of this, there was a tension among all the soldiers of the keep. With the massive fire that showed no signs of stopping, that meant a lot of monsters and demi-humans were likely to come our way to escape it. Possibly even attack us as they did so. We've had to remain on guard for days because of it. It was as I walking to the infirmary with Hugin resting on my shoulder to see if Karen needed my help with any new injured that a horn sounded off, letting those at the keep know of approaching allies. This put to pause all the tasks and assignments that all soldiers at the keep had once been doing as we quickly rushed to the gate. Think that the battle took longer than expected because of the enemy being strong? One soldier ahead of me asked his friend. Ridiculous, Jorge. With Commander Darian leading them, any enemy they face would have been doomed. His friend replied. Me of battle mages alongside paladins is near unbeatable. Hope Cecily has a good tale to tell us when she gets back. A soldier next to me said to his friend, who began to laugh. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted Odin appear next to me. Yet, instead of a joyous expression, his mouth was a grim line. I wonder if they won? I asked aloud to no one in particular. I got a few positive answers from the soldiers around me, but I had to wait a bit longer before Odin finally spoke. As a god of war and death, I can dispel for you the comforting illusion of hopeful victory. The assault was an utter failure and massacre. How? I found myself asking quietly. The abomination was ready for them, and much stronger than they anticipated. Their first attack showed promise, even if the creature blocked it. They were never allowed a second as it rained spears upon them. Those that came out of it unscathed were ordered to retreat. Why not tell me this sooner? Because you didn't need the added burden to weigh upon your mind just yet. Blame an old man for sparing you the horrors of war for a moment longer. Now, the reprieve is over. As he said this, we joined the crowd of soldiers watching as the front gate opened and remnants of the army that had been sent out were now starting to stagger in. Most of them were covered in scorch marks, burns, and numerous other injuries. All of them looked exhausted. What happened? Captain Pike asked as he pushed his way through the crowd. He had a look on his dark face that was hard to discern if it was a scowl of anger or worry. One of the soldiers managed to stagger over to Captain Pike and answer, "The assault failed, sir. More than half of us were taken out by the first rain of bloody spears. The commander ordered a retreat after that. More fell to the second before we could get away in time. The inferno that had been lit to starve this monster off got a few others. I had to lead everyone back here because Sergeant Wilcost fell to the second volley. We had to move non-stop to keep ahead of the flames. I don't know if we're the only ones to make it back. Did anyone get here before us, sir?" Captain Pike shook his head. "You're the first. What about the commander?" The soldier had a sad look upon his face. "I don't know. Last we saw, he was still at the front when he sounded the retreat. I should have done more. Help the commander Captain Pike put his hand on the man's shoulder. You did enough. You got your comrades back home, and that's a damn sight better than what could have happened, he said in reassurance, earning a small nod from the soldier. After he said this, Captain Pike turned to the rest of us. What the hell are all of you doing, standing there and gawking? These soldiers just got back home after moving for days. Get over here and help them to the infirmary before I give you a reason to go yourselves. With this warning, everyone in the area was soon ripped from their shocked stupor, and the keep became a hive of activity as soldiers began helping to act as walking supports or carrying the recent arrivals to the infirmary. I was already rushing there in case they needed my aid as Odin followed. Prepare, Naya. War is on the horizon. Those that fell to the spears are being made into more soldiers. It is not truly certain which direction the enemy will push first, but it is certain that your country will face this foe, one day or another. Which direction do you think they will go first? I questioned. Assaulting walls and fortresses will require more soldiers than the enemy currently has from those it's captured. Likely, it will turn to the disorganized pockets of demi-humans that live among the hills and add them to its horde before turning back here. When could it happen? Days, weeks, months? War is always uncertainly certain. War eventually comes to all. The unpredictability of when it comes is the troublesome aspect of it. Just know that this war will be unlike any you have ever seen before. It will be much worse. That final sentence filled me with a strange form of dread. I've seen battles against demi-human skirmishes before, but those seemed relatively tiny compared to what I've been told about wars. Events of terrible bloodshed that took so much from the winning and losing sides. With all of that horror making up just a normal war, it forced me to ponder a truly nightmarish thought. What could be worse than a normal war? Commander Darian. Day unknown. I don't know where I am. One moment, I had been ruminating upon my failure and being taken by those roots. The next, I'm in this strange forest of trees. Some were white, others were red, but all of them seemed foreign to me. My wounds were gone, yet that gave little comfort. None of this felt right, and each moment longer felt like something was buzzing at the back of my mind, yet I couldn't scratch it. As I continued walking, I found an open area up ahead where I thought I could see a figure in the distance. I wasn't completely trusting as to run towards an unknown person without any method of protection in place, especially after being cocooned by those roots. Looking around, I spotted a low-hanging branch on one of the white trees that looked sturdy. Using my strength, I broke the branch off and gave it a few testing swings. It was a poor substitute for Dawnfall, but it would have to do for the moment. I took notice that the end of my makeshift club bled sap that almost was the consistency and color of blood. Shaking the sap off with one good flick, I started walking towards the person in the distance. I pray to the Four that I can overcome whatever challenge this may be. The Four aren't real. I grasped my head as words stabbed into my mind like daggers of ice before fading away. It was like trying to remember a dream, but all that could be recalled were the feelings of that dream. Why did it make me upset? I was unable to remember, but I couldn't let that slow me down. I needed answers and I needed to get out of here. So, shaking my head, I trudged onwards. Growing closer, I could pick out the details of this man. He had messy blonde hair that was swept back. The clothes he wore, which I might assume belonged to a wandering mercenary or adventurer, were worn out and dirty. His skin was extremely pale, which only highlighted the black squirming veins under the skin of his face. These veins only matched the black roots that made up his right arm, ending in black claws. These same roots spread across his chest and continually rippled in activity. Looking up, I met the man's crimson eyes that were the exact same as Kellan and Frankus. They bored into me, and while this stranger gave me a warm smile, his eyes froze any warmth that the man was attempting to exude. "Who are you?" I demanded in a tone of warning. "Your ruler/god/master." My hand clenched my head again as the cold stabbing pain filled it once again. Despite this weakness, I held my makeshift club up in warning to the man. "A friend if you would let me be." The man replied calmly and took a few short steps towards me with his hands out in a sign of peace. And yet, just like my former subordinates, you're infested by the tree as well, I commented in a terse voice. It frightened me when he began laughing in amusement. Infested? No, I'm not infested. The tree is merely an extension of my being, and I? Merely a projection. My eyes narrowed. A projection of what? I questioned, not entirely certain that I actually wanted the answer to what I asked. An almost primal fear seemed to claw at my heart the longer I remained near this man. Oblivion. The Omega. The Devourer. I fell to a knee as the pain started to become unbearable, and it was almost maddening to know that words were said, yet feel them slip away. It was as if I was trying to cup sand against extreme winds and feel it just slip away. Of something so much greater. But if you must be convinced, how about I show you more? The man said in a placating tone, as if I was a child who knew nothing of the world. He began walking off in a random direction. Part of me wanted to just walk away right now, but my body almost seemed to move on its own as I got back up to my feet and started following him. Why wasn't I just turning away? What was making me follow this being? Walking behind him, with my makeshift club prepared to hit this man if he tried anything, my eyes noticed the forest starting to change. Where there had once been fewer red trees amongst the white, now the white trees were being overtaken by the red. Suddenly, images flashed in my mind of a dark tree and a massive red slitted eye. Another flash, and I was walking behind the stranger once more. Yet, the vision of the tree was more of a premonition as we approached the dark tree that oozed a dark sap into the ground, staining it black. But unlike the vision, there was a difference to what I saw now. At the base of the tree were a set of thrones made from the black roots of the tree. One sat empty, yet I could only assume that it was meant to be the stranger's. In the other, the golden ethereal form of a bestial woman with 10 tails. She had an inhuman beauty, but it only made her form seem extremely fragile, as if a touch might break her into pieces. It was this fragility that elicited a slight gasp of shock from me when the stranger arrived next to the woman in her throne and cupped her chin before lifting her head up to him. Drawing closer, I noticed that there was no life in this form of hers. Her eyes were golden saucers, staring blankly forwards. Her body didn't move, appearing more like a statue than anything living. Who was this woman? Queen/thief/slave. Growling in pain as I clutched my skull, I asked, who is she? What more is this supposed to show me? This is simply an echo of Mana from my beautiful fox goddess, Kasha. I heard a hint of a mocking tone in his voice, almost like a joke which I lacked the context of. Then, the man pulled this echo into a kiss that just appeared wrong. It looked like the stranger was kissing a corpse. Once finished, he pulled away and moved the echo's head so that it faced forwards once again. Finishing this, the man took a seat in the throne next to the echo before taking her hand into his own and entwining his root-like hand into the echo's. As for what this is supposed to show you? Well, you're looking upon what projects this form. The stranger gestured at the black tree behind him. This conduit gives me access to this realm, and it's all thanks to my beautiful fox here. He pulled the echo over in her throne so that her head rested on his shoulder. Truly, a magnificent helper that has gotten me so far. Yes, you really have. The man turned the echo's head to face him and began nodding her head in a macabre act of puppeteering. Oh, my beautiful toy. It's only fitting that you, as my future queen, will help your king this way. I'll make sure to reward you. Another vision came to my mind once more. This time, it was that same bestial woman, Kasha, yet she was no longer an ethereal golden. Unlike the lifeless echo, she displayed extreme fear in her eyes as roots bound her to her throne and muffled her screaming. More roots stabbed into her and pumped out golden blood which they greedily drank. All the while, the stranger stroked her cheek and laughed. Hanging above both of them was a large skeleton with roots growing across its bones that jigged the being like a puppet. Terrifyingly enough, this skeleton was among the ranks of the undead as it also joined the woman's muffled screams with bellows of his own. Not even death would give one release from this creature. I was back in the forest once more, breathing heavily as I looked at the stranger and the echo who the stranger played with. My eyes narrowed into a harsh glare at this monster. "You're an evil monster." That got the stranger to end whatever ministrations he enacted upon the echo and to instead face me with an unreadable look. An evil monster? Is it so evil to be hungry and wish to eat the ripened fruit from a tree? Instead of being allowed my fill, I was unjustly locked away, looked down upon by ants, forced to endure an eternity of pain wasting away. The man's voice changed from being a human-like tone to something ancient, filled with rage and hate. "Whatever you underwent, I've no doubt that it was too good for you. You're the one that Francus was claiming to be the one great god, aren't you?" The creature, because that was what this thing was, grinned at me. "I don't see a god here. I see a demon that can do nothing more than steal and eat. I'm no mere god, boy. Gods cower before me. They are just arrogant children playing with powers that don't belong to them. Their only use is to act as the mound of sugar that attracts the ants to them." The creature pretentiously claimed. "Good to know. It makes certain that I will never fall for trying to worship you." I spat at the thing /r. That earned an ominous laugh that seemed to echo all around this forest. When the thing stopped, it looked down its nose at me and maintained its grin. "Who said that your compliance was necessary? Drop the stick." My hand stopped obeying me as I released my grip on my only weapon. "Prostrate yourself before me." To my horror, I fell to my knees and began bowing to the monster/gr. "What is this?" "I am your god. I am your master. I am your reason." The pain in my head took on new heights as I began screaming while still continuing to bow before the monster/gr. I've never felt an agony like this, and I wouldn't wish it even upon my greatest enemy. To my greater frustration, the creature/ggr didn't even bother paying attention to me as he started playing with the echo once more, as if my suffering was a dull event. "Forgive me if I ended up lying to you earlier. All of this was meant to distract you from the changes that I've slowly been enacting upon your mind. Feel proud that you have a strong enough will that I needed to take this step to fully convert you," the creature/ggr told me as I continued screaming. It felt like something was worming its way through my brain as I felt things changing bit by bit that I couldn't truly name. Only the absence of knowing that something was missing, but not realizing what it was, plagued me. What was this Mons/Hogre doing to me? "You know, your little friend, Francus, was much like you are now. So assured of his mental fortitude and faith, so frightful as it all came crumbling down. Keep to heart that you managed to resist much longer than he did." The M/Id-Hogre taunted with a chuckle. "I have always been your gods. They have always been Nidhogre. Get out of my head." I screamed and pleaded to my Nidhogre to release me from this torment. Wouldn't the one great god save me? Why would I? I'm not just in your head. I'm worming around inside your guts, your limbs, your heart. All of them are mine. Continuing to prostrate myself before my god, Nidhogre and the echo of his pet goddess, and queen, Kasha, I was beginning to question why I was feeling so upset in the first place. Being in front of Lord Nidhogre, the one great god, should be a moment of joy for me. I was currently being blessed by Lord Nidhogre for my devotion to him. "My lord, I'm proud to be before you and the image of your queen. How might I serve you?" I asked with utter respect. Lord Nidhogre gave me a warm smile while continuing to enjoy his divine rights to the queen's echo. "As my commander, Darian. We have my conquest to plan before my ascension. As such, it is only fitting for the one leading my armies to receive my greatest blessing." I smiled at Lord Nidhogre's generosity. "Thank you, my lord." "No," Lord Nidhogre countered, "thank you, my commander." Fox fever, or is it fervor? Teresia. I sat with my fellow mages as we waited for Guildmaster Theo to finish his conversation with Guildmaster Arlen. During this time, I sent a few of colleagues to see about acquiring supplies from this branch in case Guildmaster Theo wished for us to leave at an earlier time instead of spending the night here. For the rest of us, We either sat around at any of the tables in the guild hall or some of us talked with the mages of this branch to learn of any recent news of the area. As for me, I spent my time sitting at a table saying a few quiet prayers to my lady while also observing the area. The guild hall was relatively calm at the moment, but that might change soon with the rising sun. This left me with watching those that were currently here meandering about. There were a few mages that appeared to have just awoken and were making their way to what I guessed was a place to eat. That or they were heading to some area to continue whatever studies that they were performing yesterday. A few more came into the building through the front door and wandered off. I noticed another mage that seemed to quickly scurry up the stairway and rush away. I amused myself with thinking that he might have overslept and was late to meet with his associates. Observing people was always an interesting activity since it could point out things that seemed unnoticeable until you took the time to watch. It was a few minutes longer when I spotted Guildmaster Arlen come up the stairs from the vault. He seemed to look around for a moment before his eyes finally fell upon me, then he began walking over. Guildmaster Arlen approached where I sat at the table with a neutral expression on his face. Yet, most peculiarly, I didn't see Guildmaster Theo with him. Where was he? Teresia, was it? Arlen asked. Yes, I replied with a curt nod. How may I help you, Guildmaster Arlen? I questioned before adding, and where might Guildmaster Theo be, as I do not see him with you? Guildmaster Arlen gave me a soft smile and answered, during our discussion about her, Arlen intoned with emphasis, I showed Theo an artifact in the vault that he took great interest in examining, and since I couldn't have him take it out due to procedure, he decided to remain inside for short while longer. That got a wry smirk to grow on my lips. It was well known that Guildmaster Theo had an almost unhealthy interest in the arcane, especially if it was something that caught his eye. Usually, he kept his fascination in control when working, but sometimes the thing that took his interest was too difficult to ignore. I understand that Guildmaster Theo can become enthusiastic at times when shown something that catches his eye. My ears heard the sound of many footsteps and I looked over to see that the guild hall was beginning to fill with activity as more mages appeared. Guildmaster Arlen took notice as well since he gazed around. It appears that this isn't the best place to have a private conversation. I stood up from my chair and Guildmaster Arlen took this as the sign to start walking, to which I followed. Where might we be going? I questioned upon walking in stride with the man. To my office, Teresia. You see, I had quite a few questions for you, considering the unique connection you have that Theo told me about. But received an understanding nod from me. We walked up the staircase towards a door with Guildmaster Arlen's name on it. He opened the door for me and let me inside before following after and closing the door. What questions do you have? I'm not fully certain that I can answer all of them, but I will try my best. I explained while gazing around the room at the multiple shelves of tomes and artifacts. Compared to Guildmaster Theo, Guildmaster Arlen's office was neater and more organized. This connection you have with the Fox Princess, how does it fully work? He asked. Guildmaster Arlen's question took me a moment to fully answer. It's not exactly easy to explain without you being able to see what I or other maidens can. Part of this connection is the obvious. Our eyes become filled with golden rings and we receive greater amounts of mana and spellcasting ability than others who have also consumed her blood. For the changes that are subtle, one of these changes involves a new sense. This change seemed to pique Guildmaster Arlen's interest, a new sense. Indeed, Guildmaster Arlen. Us maidens can see the worship given to Our Lady in the form of golden motes of mana. This mana appears to be mostly produced from any who give her worship. From there, it appears to coalesce around objects of worship, and it can enter into the maidens at times, but it mostly floats off in a direction that we infer is whatever direction Our Lady currently is at. Additionally, I believe that Our Lady hears the prayers of her maidens more clearly than her normal worshippers due to our connection. I wouldn't dare to try and test this by calling upon her so callously, but there is this feeling that she would come if asked. I explained. I turned around to see Guildmaster Arlen pacing in thought. Interesting. This golden mana, Is it emitted from only those who have already consumed the fox princess's blood? I shook my head. It matters not if one has consumed her blood or not, only that one prays to her. If before Guildmaster Arlen could continue, I heard a commotion coming from outside his office. What in the world is that? Guildmaster Arlen pondered while exceedingly calm. I didn't answer as I went to the door just as he did, before Guildmaster Arlen opened it to reveal the shocking scene of my colleagues unconscious and subdued. From what it looked like, all the mages that had just entered the guild hall earlier had all been party to this unwarranted assault. Guildmaster Arlen. What I forced sleep. The last thing I saw upon turning to look at the elder mage was a spell array pointed at my face before consciousness left me. Guildmaster Arlen. I watched my spell array fade away as the effect of my spell took hold on the poor girl. I made certain to catch her as she fell so that she didn't end up injuring herself. All the while, my eyes studied the strange white clothing she wore that was saturated in mana, like the golden blood that Theo had shown me. It was a shame that I needed to petrify the man, but it was too dangerous to let him go. If we found a cure for this magical infection that plagued him and the others, I'd free him and cure the man immediately. But for now, he needed to be kept out of the way so that he didn't end up creating more problems. After I had dealt with Theo, I discreetly alerted my subordinates to assemble mages that knew the forced sleep spell so that we could subdue the infected party from Rantel while they were unaware. After this, I separated Teresia from the others and tried to get a few questions answered before I subdued her as well. It was a good thing that I did this as the information she gave me was both highly useful and gravely concerning. From what I can surmise, this connection was one that allowed for a magically transmitted communication between the infected and the Fox Princess. Her being able to seemingly steal the mana from those who worshipped her, infected or not, had me ponder if there was some hidden enchantment that was using their faith to allow easier access for their mana to be stolen and converted. Beyond this, the other matter of concern lay with preventing these infected from contacting this woman. She had to be prevented from knowing of our resistance at all costs. We would have to keep the infected in magically induced comas, or even petrified like Theo had unfortunately been, until a cure was found. Looking down at the sleeping woman in my arms, I considered the connection to the Fox Princess which she spoke of. Perhaps the connection could go both ways and be used against her. It would be useful in trying to subdue or kill her. Though, I was more inclined to subduing her because of the immense knowledge on magic that she had. While I am of the belief that knowledge can be dangerous, I also believe that it should not fully be destroyed, if only so that we retain methods to counter future dangers that may utilize such dangerous magic. I had extreme doubts that this woman was actually a goddess, but if she was, I have enough knowledge of history to know that any benevolent gods have long since ceased appearing to mortals. Since then, there have only been monsters and tyrants that arrived before mortals in one form or another. I believe that, after the other ruinous beings' defeats, this woman uses guile and trickery to appear the benevolent goddess so that none attempt to stop her before it becomes too late to do so. If I must choose between one tyrant or the other, I will go for the one that is mortal which I know. And this woman in my arms will be the key to understanding this infection and the Fox Princess's power. I'll have to inform Fluda of this development as he may have some useful esoteric knowledge about this that I lack. The footsteps of boots pulled my focus from the woman and to one of my mages, Farkos, who had been instrumental in organizing this subjugation in such a short window of time. Guildmaster Arlen, all the infected mages have been captured. What are your next orders? Take the other mages to the first laboratory and ensure that they are kept in continual comas under magic dampening restraints. I'll come by later to petrify a few to reduce our risk, but leave some others as they are so that they can be studied. As for Teresia here, we need to take her to the warded research room and ensure that she is put into the strongest magic dampening restraints we have. She may possibly be stronger than all the others due to her enhanced stage of infection. I answered, receiving a nod from Farkos as he took the woman from my arms and carried her away. I have much work to do if I am to stop this madness. The copy. Day 42. Passing by the quickly constructed prison cells outside the temple, I made note of each cell I passed. The first of which was the enclosed building which contained the prisoner who was highest on both mine and the boss's shit list. He had been the leader of the slain theocracy troops that infiltrated the kingdom and wanted to make off with the, unknown to them at the time, boss and Nina so that she could be questioned. I wasn't feeling that merciful to the man. But we had delayed this long enough as more important matters had to be attended to. One of which was the matter of Haven Lake. When the boss had gone out of commission, that had managed to dispel me until I found myself resummoned to fight the succubitch. After that, I went to manage things at the settlement and was relieved to hear that nothing disastrous had occurred with mine and the boss's disappearance. They had managed to run themselves just fine with the council managing each of the people under their purview. Though, Ken did make sure to oversee whatever decisions that they had made. And on that note, the boss and I would seriously need to have a discussion on what to do about Haven Lake. Sure, the settlement is a couple miles away from Rantle and located within a forest, but that would only hide it for so long. We couldn't exactly call it a settlement any longer as it was more of a large village that was turning into a town. It is going to be noticed, either because some hunter or a random adventurer went too deep into the forest and spotted walls where there shouldn't be. The only question is how we would go about broaching the subject with the Riastais, and more specifically, Rantle. After all, it was full of demi-humans, a lot of which most humans have only ever fought against and treated as monsters. It would have to wait for a later day. For now, the time had come to handle the asshole. Entering the building, I saw the two kitsune assigned to guard the metal coffin that held the blonde man were standing on either side of it. The only part of the man's body that wasn't encased in the metal plating was his head, which had the tips of his guard's tail poised to kill him the moment he tried anything. Just looking at the man filled me with a revulsion that the boss had shared. He was almost the spitting image of Clementine if she had more masculine features. I hope you haven't gotten too uncomfortable with your lodgings, I teased the man as he looked at me with a glare of cold eyes. Then, he finally spoke, "You have kept me in these restraints for days, beast woman. I hope you realize exactly what sort of enemy you're making by doing so." A mocking smirk grew on my lips at the threat he was trying to make. Believe me, I know exactly what sort of enemy you are. One that likes to bluster and shout threats against those who are completely out of your league. A vindictive feeling overcame me as I drew closer to the man and taunted, "It's exactly how your sister acted when I broke her." It pleased me to see the rapid changes of emotion that the man went through, starting from shock, worry, anger, and then ending with a glower. "Is my traitorous sister still alive?" he demanded. "Oh, she is most certainly alive, even if she wishes for anything but right now. You see, she decided to try and touch my loved ones, one of which being my kit. A sin which you also tried to commit." With a dramatic snap of my fingers, I projected a scrying spell in front of the man to reveal the cell that the boss had left the little bitch in weeks ago. And, like she had last been left, the girl was still facing the wall, her broken face still contorted into a terrified visage. "What did you do?" the man asked in a barely even tone. Clemmy, here, was making so many useless threats to me that I continually slammed her face into the floor until she learned to keep her mouth shut. After that, I permanently paralyzed her with a spell and left her alone in that cell, staring at the wall and unable to look away or even blink. "It's probably been a month for her by now," I replied. After a few moments of continued watching, the man pulled his gaze from the sight of his sister and looked at me with daggers in his eyes. "Clementine may be a traitor, but this is just cruel. Just kill her and be done with it." I poked my finger to his forehead, much to his discomfort, and gave a spiteful grin under my veil. "No. Her ass was mine the moment she touched my people. She's also a horrific and unrepentant murderer, so I still wouldn't let her off so easily as to just kill her." "Cease with the gloating. What do you plan on doing to me and my men, if they're even still alive, that is?" the blonde questioned. "That depends on what I learn from you." The blonde scoffed at my answer. "I'm not going to tell you anything." A chuckle escaped my lips at the man's misplaced defiance. Who said that I needed your consent? I immediately began ripping the information I needed from his head as his face became an expression of agony while a hiss of pain escaped from his clenched teeth. Impressive to see that he wasn't screaming. Let's see, Quaes Hasia Quintia, a member of the Black Scripture Organization of the Slain Theocracy, the members of which are considered the strongest among the entire country. Yet, it appears that Quaes isn't the strongest among this group. As for why he and his men came here? Oh, so the leaders of their entire religion wanted what they assumed to be a powerful magical artifact. And, they're also aware of the boss and her religion. Guess that's a problem to deal with in the future. I'll have to let the boss know about everything before we end up getting some crusade formed against us by an entire nation of zealots. At least they wouldn't be able to fully focus on attacking us due to the war they were fighting on two fronts. One was against the demi-humans attempting to wipe them out from the south and southwest. The other was against the elf kingdom ruled by a king said to be the son of a god. The boss might just have to look into that. Among other things. What was that? Quaes demanded over deep gasps. I playfully patted his cheek in response. Just me reading your mind. I could have been gentler, but you tried touching my kit, so I wasn't feeling all that nice about doing it. Quite a bit I saw in there, Quaes. I replied with a taunting grin. In turn, the blonde's eyes became filled with a number of emotions, one of which was horror. But that's impossible. Unheard of? Unworthy of a non-human like myself. I interrupted and asked for him, sorry to say, but I'm a goddess of magic. There are a great many things that you'd find impossible which I find child's play. His eyes narrowed. Then, what now? You've gotten everything from me? Quaes asked, his eyes flickering to that of his paralyzed sister. Oh, he assumed that I was going to do something like that to him. Poking his nose to get his attention back to me, I replied, compared to your sister, you're a saint. Then again, most other normal people would be, so you don't need to worry about becoming personal friends with a wall. But that doesn't leave you completely innocent of crimes that I can overlook. That got a confused look from the man. Crimes? What crimes, aside from trying to take the girl to be questioned? He pondered aloud. A lot of the violence you've committed is mostly justified. Your people are at war, so you're just doing your duty as a soldier to your country. What I can't stand is the murder of fleeing elven civilians. I explained. Oh, I had definitely seen the time that he and a few of his men had found a small group of elven civilians fleeing from the conflict of both the Elven Kingdom and the Slain Theocracy. Unfortunately, their only method of escape had been a route going south that crossed into the Theocracy's territory. They attempted to sneak away, but they had been found and captured by Quaes before being interrogated for information. Information which was already known by Quaes and his men. So, once finished, the man had all of the elves, some of which were children, killed. After all, in his mind, any elf could be a combatant. The Elf King has shown this quite often as he'd send children off to die instead of fighting himself with his immense power. He didn't want to take the risk, so he had them killed. In a pragmatic way, his reasoning was understandable. But morally? It was reprehensible. That left me at an odd conundrum as part of me wanted to punish the guy all the more for what he's done. The other part, the one that was reasonable, wanted to give the man a lighter sentence in addition to being able to utilize him in interactions with the Theocracy. I think I'll leave this up to the boss to decide as she'd like to know about this beforehand. I think they'll put some thought into what your fate should be, but trust me, I gave him a playful flick to his nose. I can be very creative with the punishments I decide. And my men? I'll rifle through their minds as well. Depending on what I find, I might punish them or I'll just teleport them to the Theocracy's border. We'll see. Until then, I hope you'll enjoy your continued stay in your cozy box. With this, I left the blonde to stew in his imprisonment as I traveled to the next set of prisoners on my list to visit. I'd only had to walk a bit further before stopping at the containment box which held a pair of frost dragons that had survived. Nodding to the pair of kitsune standing guard in front of the heavy door, I entered it and found the two flying lizards chained to the ground from all of their limbs. They only had enough slack in these chains to make the smallest of movements, such as eating the food that they have been given or relieving themselves. "Hello there," I said, receiving worried looks from the pair. "I've got a few questions about your little flight that involved raining freezing death on a bunch of people. Mind enlightening me?" The dragons glanced to one another before looking back to me. Then, the male answered, "Vandalosia, a bastion, and I came here to collect what we thought would be a powerful weapon. When we saw the humans fighting over it, we wanted to remove the competition." The dragon replied. "And what spurred you on to try and fight armies made up of the undead, humans, and kitsune?" I interrogated, my tails at the ready to immediately block any attack that the dragons might make. "We wished to overthrow our king," the dragon answered, making me motion for him to elaborate. "He believes that dragons must have complete supremacy over all others and form an empire, at the cost of his restrictions and rules. The three of us, now two, had issue with this, but lacked the strength necessary to oppose it." "Oh, little revolutionaries or would-be conquerors. And what next? You beat your king, and then what? No doubt that there would be a lot of dragons under his command, so what would you do with them?" That question stumped the two dragons, and slightly surprised me as I almost expected them to declare that they would become the next ruler. The female dragon spoke up this time. "We just wanted to get rid of the restrictions and rules Olisai Dark Halilil put upon us. A bastion wanted to rule in Olisai Dark's place. This seriously couldn't be their entire plan, right? It had as much depth and thought as a child's. Actually, how old are you two?" "Karakozars is 19 winters and I am 21 winters. The one I guessed to be Vandalosia answered. "Okay, so in the timescale of dragons, I'd guess that they really were the equivalent to children or young teenagers. No wonder this has so little thought. To give the pair of you a little lesson, what do you know about power vacuums?" I questioned. Karakozars was the one to reply, "We have no idea what you are talking about. Is it a spell? Okay, I guess I know what I'm dealing with right now." I couldn't help but rub the bridge of my nose as I now realized that these two are idiots. No. A power vacuum is when an entire group, ruled by one being with a lot of power to keep the others in line, loses that position of authority without warning. When that happens, it leaves a position of power that everyone wants to fill, causing a huge number of conflicts. From what I can tell, your society is ruled by strength, correct? The dragons gave me a nod. "The strongest has the right to rule." Karakozars replied. "Then this just confirms what I know will happen. You kill your king, neither of you wish to rule," both nodded in agreement. "Then your entire little dragon kingdom is going to start tearing itself apart to find out who should be in charge. If you hate your king so much, why don't you just leave and find a new place to live? We were born upon the Azalizia Mountains. Why should we leave if we just remove the one making the problems?" Vandalosia countered. "Oh, my boss. These two were prideful idiots as well." "Because it would cause less problems for you," I said with a sigh, like it should be obvious. "Your king, is he planning on expanding his little empire from the mountains? Maybe. We aren't fully certain on what he will do once the entire mountain range is under his control." Karakozars replied. "That could be a potential issue. The boss, and because she knew, then I knew, that the dwarves lived in those mountains. So, what might happen to them? Actually, what other groups live upon the mountains besides dragons? Frost giants, quaggoa, and dwarves are the ones that are smart enough to talk. Otherwise, I don't know since the rest are dumb prey." Karakozars answered. Then, Vandalosia interrupted and added, "Don't forget the kobolds. I've seen them on occasion if they come up from the depths of the mountains. They taste pretty good." Karakozars nodded in agreement. "Yes, kobolds as well. Meepo definitely wouldn't be happy to hear them say that about his people. But it could be an interesting idea to see if the boss and I could introduce Meepo to more kobolds as a method of diplomacy. I'll put a pin in that for later, since the issue at large comes from how volatile the factions upon and under the mountains might be right now. If this Dragon King wants to spread an empire, he likely won't be satisfied with just owning the mountains. This was more or less confirmed with the way that these two scaly idiots considered how might makes right. If a trio of young dragons could massacre a portion of a human army by their lonesome, then this Olisai Dark wouldn't think twice about trying his luck against a race he considers weaker than himself. As of right now, how much of the mountains does Olisai Dark control? The northern third of the mountains. Progress further has been stalled due to conflict with the frost giants. Besides frost dragons, the frost giants are the other strongest race of the mountains. Vandalosia explained. I couldn't help but wonder if these frost giants held any similarity to the Jotun of the Jotunheim. It would be interesting to find out, though I highly doubt that the ones of the New World would compare to the ones the boss and I knew. Still, Olisai Dark doesn't control all of the mountains just yet, so his ambitions wouldn't start reaching out just yet. The boss and I had time. I gave a slight smirk looking at the two dragons. The both of you have been surprisingly cooperative. Why might that be? You are stronger. Karakozaz admitted, you killed the undead controlling all of the other strange undead which killed a bastion. You could possibly be stronger than Olisai Dark. It would be foolish to go against you. Smart. That was the only compliment I had for whatever amount of brain cells they had that gave them any sort of survival instinct. If the pair of you aren't aware by now, I am a goddess, so picking a fight with me would go very poorly for you. I informed the two and got accepting looks from the pair in return. Now, with the pair of you being cooperative enough to not force me to read your mind, I'll likely be more lenient in whatever punishment I have in mind for you. Punishment? The pair asked, giving me a feeling of déjà vu due to dealing with Quaes a few minutes earlier. Yes, punishment. I confirmed, while I can understand how you were raised, through both your instincts and upbringing, to see most other species as prey, there comes a limit to my tolerance. Therefore, I think that the most suitable punishment for both of you is a lot of hard labor. Both dragons looked at one another in silent discussion. Upon reaching whatever unspoken consensus, they turned back to me. We will be willing to serve. Vandalosia spoke for the both of them. That got a smile from me since there were so many uses for a pair of strong dragons. Especially lifting. Very good. Now, let's hear a little more about your king and his little empire. Kasha. Day 44. I watched with pride as Nina stood before me looking completely human. It had taken a few days after learning the trick to make her tail disappear before she was able to do the same with the rest of her features in tandem. But it had all worked out in the end as my kit had mastered the skill faster than I had expected. Great job, kiddo. I knew you could do it. I congratulated while tousling her hair. This managed to pull Tyr and Nero out of their training as they came over to examine Nina. Thanks. I'm just happy that I finally nailed down the trick to disguise myself fast enough. The only downside is how much of my mana this will burn through if I keep it up for long periods. Nina replied with a grin of her own before adding, and it feels really uncomfortable. How do you manage to keep yourself disguised for multiple hours every day? A shrug was all I could give in reply. It does feel uncomfortable, but I just power on through and ignore it. That tends to work. I answered. You know, Tyr spoke up, while you look perfectly fine, I prefer the ears and tails on you since they make you look more adorable. Nina's eyes rolled in feigned annoyance, yet her smile still remained. Finally, Nero approached Nina and seemed to make a mental estimation as he put his hand a few inches above Nina's head before tracing it to the top of his head. Yeah, you're much shorter now. What? Nina squawked in slight embarrassment. To be honest, I counted your ears as part of your height. Without them, you've lost a few inches, making you nowhere close to beating me in height, Nero teased with a chuckle. I was unable to hide the snort of amusement at this observation. In reaction, Nina's face took on a reddened hue as she crossed her arms across her chest and dispelled the illusion. Once more, her bestial features returned, with her ears putting her right around Nero's height. Seems to not be the case any longer. Nina countered. Still taller, though. Nero taunted back with a fit of infectious laughter which we all joined in. Even Nina ended up giggling at this. As we petered out, I patted Nina on the back before leaning over and whispering in her ear, "I don't have a spell to permanently magically increase your height, but I could add an inch or two to the heels of your boots if you wanted to mess with Nero." A mischievous look appeared in my kit's eyes as she glanced over to Nero. Maybe a little later, Nina whispered back as Nero watched our conspiratorial plotting with a suspicious glance. When the pair of us finally finished our plotting, Nero asked, "What is it that the pair of you are whispering about?" "Nothing you need to know about at the moment," I replied with a teasing grin. The boy gave us an unconvinced look. "Right," he said dryly, "well, while you two continue with your suspicious plotting, I'm going to go back to practicing." With that said, Nero walked back to the spot he'd been at before and went back to working on his spell array once again. Taya gave Nina and I a raised brow, and I replied with a finger to my lips, earning a snort of amusement from my older kit. Then, she walked over and joined Nero in practice. "Guess I should get back to work on increasing my proficiency with Kitsune illusion," Nina remarked. I gave her a hum in response. "Actually, I would like to work on the next skill I wanted to teach you. I have a plan for training your Kitsune illusion tomorrow," I countered, getting a look on interest from my kit. Tomorrow, the training method I had in mind for Nina was to send her to Elwold and have her remain in disguise for as long as possible while interacting with the village. It would also help to get her adapted to her senses so that she wouldn't deal with sensory overload whenever she was in E-Rantle. And what skill would that be? I found myself smiling before I answered, "You're a kitsune, kiddo. All kitsune should know how to enter their fox form." Nina's eyes widened at the news, and the slight wag of her tail told me that she was a little excited about it. "How does it work? Will I end up becoming a massive fox like you? Am I using magic to actually transform?" Nina asked in a deluge of questions. Giving her a pat on the head, I calmly replied, "For your age and single tail, you're likely going to be a little larger than a regular fox. As you get older, and you acquire more tails, your body's size will grow to reflect that. It would be a long while before you grow to the size that I am, or was, since I'm confident that I've gotten bigger since gaining my 10th tail." I found myself looking back at my tails for a moment as I said this. As for transforming yourself, it's more mental than magical. When kitsune change to their bestial forms, you're just willing your body to shift. It's mostly instinctual since becoming a fox is a bit more natural and easier than becoming humanoid. I answered, earning a questioning look from Nina. "Do you mean to say that changing back to a humanoid form is harder? You're starting to make me worried about being stuck in a fox-like form," Nina asked in concern, getting a giggle from me. Shaking my head, I replied, "You won't have trouble changing back since, even if you weren't born a kitsune, you've still spent your time in a humanoid form. You have a clear idea on your body's humanoid template. The same can't be said for some other kitsune." "Why would that be?" Recalling memories I had of Mom going over some of these topics with me when I was a little girl, I answered, "When kitsune are born, they can either come out in a humanoid form or a bestial form. It's really dependent on a few factors. For instance, if the kitsune mother spends more time during a pregnancy in a bestial form, then the likelihood of her children being born in a bestial form is higher. The same applies for the mother being in a humanoid form. Because of this, some kitsune born in their bestial forms find trying to change to a humanoid form to be difficult or impossible since they can't visualize the mental template for a humanoid form. At least, that's for the first transformation. It becomes immensely easier after that as those kitsune now have a clearer idea on what to change into." That explanation helped reassure Nina, which was pleasing to see. "So, just visualize, huh?" I nodded in answer. Just visualize. Think of becoming a fox. Your hands and feet becoming paws, your body becoming coated in fur, your jaws elongating and becoming stronger, I said, putting the idea into her head as I shifted into my own bestial form, gaining a lot of height and filling the room with my size as I looked down at my kit as she took my form in. Just picture that little fox in you that just wants to come out into the world strutting on her 4 paws with her muzzle high in the air. I coaxed gently. That's what you look like as a fox. Kasha, you're huge. Nero commented from where he stood as he looked at all the details of my bestial form. I laughed at the boy's observation. Oh, you've never actually seen me in this form before, have you? I asked rhetorically. Indeed, I am much larger than other kitsune in their bestial forms. Though, I'd like to believe that size would come second compared to how beautiful my bestial form is, I teased and watched the blonde become red in the face. He rubbed the back of his head and nervously added, well, I mean your fox-like form is beautiful. It's just surprising to see how big it is. Don't worry, Nero. I'm only teasing you, I said warmly. I lowered myself down until I was laid upon my stomach, then I rested my head upon my front paws. Go ahead, kiddo. You can do it. I don't expect you to immediately, but I know you'll figure it out eventually. With a confident nod, Nina closed her eyes and attempted to transform. For what felt like minutes, I watched Nina continue to concentrate with her eyes tightly shut. I heard her whisper to herself in a mantra, think of the fox within me. While watching Nina, I couldn't help but think that this was how my mom felt when she was trying to teach me how to transform in our little apartment. There was that nervous energy where I knew that my kit could, and eventually would, transform, but I wasn't certain on how long that would take. To be entirely honest, I expected that it would take her a few days to master the ability. Yet, I felt my heart continue to thump fast in my chest as I unconsciously began wagging my tails in my growing excitement. A few minutes more, and it happened, much to my surprise. Mid-chant of her mantra, Nina's body shifted from being humanoid to becoming that of a brunette fox, just a bit bigger than a regular adult fox at a height of 2.5 feet. Yet, for a kitsune, Nina was still at an adolescent stage. She'd probably gain a few more inches when she became an adult before her growth became determined by centuries lived and tails gained. Still, examining her form from what I could see, she had a beautiful brunette coat that would only become heavier as the winter came. One interesting thing to note were the patterns of white lines in her fur that were extremely similar to those in mine, though they weren't as bright of a glow as the ones in mine. I wonder why that was? Nina's eyes soon opened and she looked down upon herself as her tail wagged in excitement. I did it, she exclaimed while twisting left and right to get a good look at herself. Unfortunately for Nina, she didn't have much time to continue this inspection as Tyre made a squeal and rushed over to where Nina was before picking her up. You look so adorable, Nina, she exclaimed while hugging her struggling sister. Tyre. Come on. Set me down. Nina complained as her paws scrabbled at air, which Tyre ignored, getting a chuckle from me as I watched the events with no intention of interfering. Nope. Not on your life. You're too cute to let go right now, little sister. Tyre replied, getting a very fox-like whine from Nina. Out of the corner of my eye, I found Nero approaching me while looking at the exchange. Then, he quietly asked me, are they always like that? You should have seen Tyre when I first showed her my true form. My heart goes out to Nina, but if it's a choice between me being the target of Tyre's extreme cuddling or Nina, then I'm going to have to throw Nina under the bus with this one. I replied before getting a strange look from Nero. What's a bus? Oh, yeah, you don't have those here. Guess an understandable way to phrase it to you would be to throw her under the wagon. I corrected myself. While I did love it here compared to Earth, there were a few things I did miss about it. Modern conveniences were a big one. I definitely missed being able to take a warm shower on demand. I mean, I can always take a warm bath if I wanted or make a replica of a shower. But I wouldn't have the same temperature control as I would with modern technology. Another is reliable and speedy communication delivery. From what I understand, message is not a reliable communication spell for those of the New World since they are unaware of who the message is coming from unless it comes from those of Yggdrasil and Yggdrasil. Then, there's the issue of the spell possibly not reaching the intended target. If it's required, I'll have to create an entirely new spell to facilitate communication in the new world or get to the bottom of why the message spell is so unreliable. Perhaps it has to do with this realm being magically weaker than the rest of Yggdrasil, or it's due to tier magic not being native to this realm. That will have to be another item to add to the growing list. I had a few things that needed to be taken care of before then. One of which will be to meet with King Ramposa about the Swine Prince. The next is to handle the slain theocracy due to their meddling. I can already predict that they will be bolder in their moves against me the stronger my religion gets. But for today, I'll enjoy my time training the kids and worry about other matters tomorrow. Baharuth Empire, outskirts of Tob. Worker Group, Foresight. Thank the gods that we're more than halfway to this place. Imina complained as she hopped off the cart and stretched her legs. Riding in that cart was getting uncomfortable and tiring. Roberdike chuckled as he got off as well. Riding in a cart for days on end might seem bad, but we should be thankful that our client didn't make us walk the entire way here. That's something I'm happy about, commented Hecaran as he and Arch got down together. It's already going to be one hell of a time traversing the forest and its dangers. Some cramped legs due to sitting too long will seem miles better than the trek we're going to have to make. Arch remained quiet as she looked at the forest with a look of heavy concentration. It was a few moments longer before the others of the group noticed their youngest member's silence. "You all right there, Arch?" Roberdike asked, grabbing the girl's attention as she looked over to the cleric. "Sorry, were you asking something?" Arch said in apology, causing Roberdike to look in the same direction the younger blonde was. Then, after getting his investigative fill, he looked back to the girl. "I've noticed that you've been looking in the direction of the forest repeatedly for the past few days with a look on your face. Especially after we saw that pillar a few days ago." Roberdike replied. A small frown grew across the girl's face as she thought about it. The night that she saw that golden pillar of pure mana in the west, she had quickly vomited out her dinner. That amount of magical power was something she had never thought to be possible, not even in her fantasies. And yet, there it had been. Something from miles away that she had been able to feel and have such an adverse reaction to. How might she have reacted if she had been right next to the source of it? That night, all the worker groups had been in deep discussions over what it might have been. It had come from the Re-Estais kingdom, but that only added more questions. Could it have been a weapon that they had created? Such talks filled the campfires that night. Yet, it was only a few days after the event that Arch could see a growing power in the form of mana start to take shape in the direction of the giant tree-like object that they had been able to spot in the distance within Tob. It worried her, yet it wasn't enough to dissuade her from taking this job as she needed the money desperately. "Ever since that night we saw the pillar, I've been able to see a lot of mana coalescing within the forest. I have no idea what it is, and it worries me," she answered, receiving looks of concern from the others. Taking a few glances around to make certain no one could overhear, Hecaran asked, "The job did want us to investigate the weird structure at the lake. That could be the reason for this mana, as structures don't just appear out of nowhere without some magic being involved. Might that be the reason for what you're seeing?" Arch could only shrug. "I started noticing it the night after the pillar, so I can't say for certain." Roberdike rested his chin in his hand while thinking, "It's a conundrum. We can't exactly just quit this job. That'd ruin Foresight's reputation and could be hazardous to our lives if the client took offense to it." "I'm in agreement," Imina said. "Doesn't mean that we have to fully consign ourselves to death. We could try to leave early if things become too perilous." Hecaran nodded to this. "Our client just wants us to take a look. If we see anything that is too much, we'll leave. But as a precaution, we'll let the other teams go ahead of us," the blonde recommended pragmatically. "At least we have a plan," Imina remarked and glanced over to the other teams that were disembarking from their carts and preparing themselves for the next step of the journey. And to be honest, I'm happy that we're the ones with this informational advantage instead of the others. All shared a silent agreement on that opinion. While none of the group were cruel or malicious, they were all well learned in the competitive nature of being a worker. Being cutthroat allowed one to make a decent living, especially when workers had to compete against the likes of adventurers or mercenaries. Adventurers had the advantage of being part of the Adventurers Guild, who ensured that their members played well together. Their only downside is that the lower-ranked members could only take jobs appropriate for their rank, typically, the extremely low-paying jobs. With workers, they had less oversight, but the lack of an organization meant that jobs had to be sought out by workers instead of being given by the guild. The other downside from a lack of organization meant that there wasn't as much protection from bad actors becoming workers. Really, the best protection came from how much workers talked to one another. If one team had earned enough bad blood, then everyone would hear of it, clients and workers alike. Most wouldn't even consider blacklisted individuals or teams as workers at that point. But that took time, and wasn't fully guaranteed to work if the worker team had a good enough reputation to mitigate it. But that was a hell of a lot better than mercenaries. While not all mercenaries were terrible people, enough of the rejects of both adventurers and workers found their way among them alongside criminals who liked to have a legitimate job in addition to their illegal activities. Mercenaries had the most freedom of the three groups. The only reputation that mattered for them was if they accomplished jobs or not. The downside is that mercenaries were more often to be hired for dangerous work or warfare since they didn't have much of a choice for jobs unless they actually had a decent reputation beyond their job performance. They certainly would be paid well for the work, but constant high risk for rewards wasn't for everyone. The one rule that workers learned quickly is to never fully trust others on the job unless they were part of your team. While not all teams or individual workers were malicious enough, it only took one accident from the wrong team to end your career. Even so, Roberdike countered, we can't expect that all of the other teams lack such knowledge, so stay cautious. Team Foresight nodded in consensus before they headed over to where the other teams were beginning to gather. In their minds, they hoped that there wouldn't be anything too dangerous at the lake, maybe even something profitable, but they prepared for the worst. Gazif Stranov. Day 45. Flying to location that had spawned the Golden Pillar was a unique experience for me. While I was aware that the Magician's Guild had spells and objects that could allow for flight, I had never thought that I would be riding one such object. To say it was astounding was an understatement. The distance we managed to cover in just a few days was almost humbling in a certain view. If I wanted to try and match such a speed, I would require one of the finest bred horses in the kingdom, and even then, it would tire long before this flying carpet would. If we had an army equipped with flying transports like this, then it could change battlefield tactics in an unprecedented manner. Steeds that would never tire, be bothered by terrain, or require housing and upkeep. It was a fanciful future to imagine. Yet, I was well enough aware of how much time and effort it took to craft weaker magical objects, let alone ones of greater quality, the best of which were national treasures. I was intimately aware of the value for such objects due to the 5 great treasures of the kingdom that were left in my care by His Majesty. 2 of those objects I had brought along with me on this assignment, the Amulet of Immortality and Razor Edge. I decided against bringing along the 3 other treasures due to the implications that could arise. The nobles and commoners would question why I was bringing all of the treasures with me to investigate this magical oddity within the kingdom. It, in turn, could spread panic as my countrymen would begin assuming the worst. It's my duty to both protect and ensure that the people feel safe, even at the cost of my safety. That's why I pledged my service, after all. This led to my current objective, confirm to His Majesty that whatever caused this pillar wouldn't endanger the kingdom. And we were getting closer from what one of the mages, a man named Hawthorne, confirmed. With such powerful magic, I pondered if the origin of it was the sorcerer I encountered over a month ago, Ainzul Gaun. There hasn't been any sign of the mysterious man who saved both Carney village and myself from the Theocracy soldiers. If it was, I prayed that he wouldn't be an enemy, as I held doubts that I could defeat him in combat, even with all 5 of the treasures at my disposal. What a troubling thought. Yet, aside from the sorcerer, there was also the woman that claimed to be a goddess, the Fox Princess. Ever since she dropped Alecto into the throne room, cursed with magic beyond the abilities of the kingdom's own mages to dispel. The fact that in one day, she had single-handedly taken down 8 Fingers' leadership, and then exposed multiple other nobles as being part of the organization, had upended the political landscape in ways I couldn't even fathom. Multiple factions of the nobility were in disarray as prominent figures of their group were to be arrested and investigated if they hadn't already been. I wasn't part of the nobility, and never would be, but I could understand how all of this scheming may hurt the common folk. I had a great deal of sympathy for His Majesty and all of the headache that came from this. What in the world? A mage commented, pulling me from my contemplation as I looked ahead to see multiple things of interest and concern. One large subject of concern was the cavalry of Prince Barbro's army packing up and in the process of leaving, in the direction of the capital. Days prior, we had passed the regular infantry of the army heading in this direction, with the assumption that His Highness had rushed ahead with his faster units to investigate the pillar as we were doing. Yesterday, we had seen scattered units of the cavalry riding back in the direction of the infantry. While there was a smattering of interest in understanding why this was, we had little time to waste since we needed to the origin of that pillar with utmost haste. I had hoped that I might be able to ask Prince Barbro what had occurred when next I saw him, but none of this explained what was going on. Further past these men, I saw what appeared to be a settlement in the distance. I knew from the most recently updated maps that there shouldn't be anything out here. What was going on? Neville, can you get us down to the front of that army? I wish to ask Prince Barbro what is happening. I asked the mage controlling this transport. Of course, Gazif. The man agreed as we lowered a bit ahead of the traversing army and I got off the carpet. Ahead, I heard the commander call out, bringing the army to a stop, yet I found that odd. I would have expected Prince Barbro to make the command himself. As the commander brought his horse ahead to meet me, I felt an odd worry in my gut. A few moments later, and I stood before Commander Ashton appearing a mixture of surprised and dour. Greetings, Ashton. Might I ask what is going on? I expected to see Prince Barbro leading the army. And why is it that you're heading back in the direction of the capital? I questioned. Ashton took a moment to take a breath as a weariness came over his features. Hello, Gazif. Looking between you and the mages over there, Ashton said with a nod of his head to the mages still waiting on the carpet, I assume that His Majesty sent you here to investigate the Golden Pillar? I gave a nod. Well, I can spare you the time wasted in learning it yourself. Seems that the Fox Princess may have been behind it. That did not bode well in the slightest, doesn't really matter at this point since His Highness decided to meet with the people of that settlement behind us and threaten them. My eyebrow rose at this. What happened after that? Asking this, I couldn't help but ponder what rash thing Barbro tried to do. That was enough to get the Fox Princess to intervene. From there, they talked, and from what the men who were with him at the time said, he told the goddess that she could work for him or die, but he would kill those in the settlement for potentially being traitors. You can guess how well she tolerated such a threat. My brows scrunched in thought at just how daft Barbro was to threaten a being of unknown ability and power. He had seen what sort of enchantment the woman had put on Alecto, so that should have instilled some measure of caution within the man. So, His Highness died? I speculated. No, the first thing that happened is she disagreed. Ashton's eyes seemed to harden for a moment at the recollection, then the prince ordered her killed. She quickly captured Prince Barbro and his men in conjured chains. Then, she told everyone that the prince has been working with one of the heads of 8 Fingers for years before summoning a meteor over the heads of the biggest concentration of the army as a threat. That was terrifying to imagine, but what worried me further is what occurred after. Please, tell me that no further hostile actions were taken? Ashton shook his head. Part of our cavalry fled, the rest of them stayed. Of those that did, many were uncertain on what to do, but then Prince Barbro ordered a charge to kill the goddess and the settlement under her protection. Only some of our troops committed to the charge. It ended in minutes as she burnt those ahead of her to nothing, not even corpses remained, and those she didn't were torn apart by large foxes with multiple tails. My blood seemed to turn cold in my veins, and I mentally conjured the image of an enemy who could appear within the throne room of the capital without any notice before burning the royal family and all the nobles of the court into ashes. I had little clue on what magical protections could be used to counter such a thing. Prince Barbaro just endangered the entire kingdom with this action. And this also leaves out the claim that he worked with 8 fingers. Every claim so far from Alecto has been correct. What would it mean for the kingdom once news of Prince Barbaro's affiliations is spread? We were already on the cusp of civil war between the factions of Prince Zaynak and Prince Barbaro. This could trigger such an event immediately as Prince Barbaro's faction attempted to put him on the throne immediately to fulfill their own interests. That or it could cause a revolt amongst the common people. The third, more worrying option, is that the nobles could declare the royal family unfit for the throne due to 2 of them being part of 8 fingers. That could break into another civil war. I worry how the people will survive such a thing. And Prince Barbaro? I was almost hesitant to ask. The Fox Princess used her magic to turn His Highness into a pig. From there, she said that she planned to meet with His Majesty in a few days with the prince in tow. Ashton answered before motioning to the army. She gave the troops a day to rest and recover by her settlement. Hell, she even had food and supplies delivered to us. But with the prince beyond our reach and many of our cavalry scattered or dead, we're heading back to the capital to regroup and hear our next orders from His Majesty. The commander looked down in thought before meeting my eyes once more. Besides, our original reason for marching the army was to see this Fox Princess and question her. We more than saw her, and our questions about her strength have been answered. We are hilariously outclassed. Just as I feared. Has she become an enemy of the kingdom after the prince's stunt? For once, since the start of this conversation, I received good news as Ashton shook his head. Not that I could tell. In fact, it seemed like she wanted to help us, potentially even become an ally. But that's beyond my decision to make. I nodded in understanding. Even with some of my initial questions and concerns answered, I'll still have to go investigate for myself. Do you believe that the Fox Princess would be amenable to that, or would it be a waste of the lives of myself and the mages? I asked. Ashton gave me a wry smirk. Seems that not even the fear of death or transfiguration can assuage your sense of duty, Gazif. Wish I had more men like you at my command, we'd probably be unstoppable. I gave a soft chuckle at his joke. I believe that you would be safe to investigate, just ensure that you do everything you can to not piss her off. Thank you, Commander, I said in gratitude. You're welcome, Sir Gazif. Good luck. Following this, Commander Ashton turned his horse back to rejoin his army while I went to rejoin the mages. What manner of chaos am I to be mired into?